Good evening, everyone. Listen, I'm gonna weigh in on some of the stuff, the major event that occurred in Minneapolis, and so I'm just gonna say that up front. That way, if people aren't interested, they don't want to listen, you don't have to, or cut me off at any time, whatever. But I wasn't going to. I was just gonna kind of let things take their course, whatever the saying is, let them play out. But I decided to go ahead and weigh in because of personal experience and some things I was thinking about earlier, and I saw a post from Hank from God's Soldiers Ministry that got my attention, and basically talked about the reason this stuff is happening is because lawlessness abounds, specifically like Jesus said in Matthew 24, people's love will grow cold for one another, and lawlessness will abound. That's the reason, lawlessness. People's love will grow cold for one another. And over the last several weeks or whatever it's been thinking a lot about compassion and civility. And I probably even mentioned in Substack live streams or just with people in general, that there is a serious lack of compassion and civility now. From everything, from words, from tweets, from true social media posts, from people posting, making videos, whatever else. There's a serious lack of compassion and civility. And I really began to see it at the end of the year 2025, prior to the holidays, over the holiday time frame, a serious lack of compassion and civility. And now that we're into 2026, it continues. And not surprised by it, because Jesus said it was going to happen in Matthew 24. He said it straight up, probably Mark 13 and Mark 13, Matthew 24. I don't think so much in Luke 21, but anyway, he said it. So it's coming to pass now. And, this is tough for me. Not really tough, just interesting. Let's just put it that way, because I've had the opportunity, let's put it that way, in my life since the time I was 5 years old. And anybody that's been listening to me for any length of time on this channel, the other channel, or any of the Substack live streams I've done or whatever, I've mentioned this, pretty much ad nauseum. But I mean, it's just the truth. I had an interesting childhood and life, in my younger years, all the way up to pretty much my 40s, I guess you could say, where I've had an opportunity to be around a lot of people, learn a lot of things, live in a lot of different areas, mostly apartments, sometimes houses or post housing when I was a kid, as a, growing up as an Army brat or whatever, but ever since I was 5 years old, that's all I knew was the military, and then later on medical and law enforcement as far as professions go and whatnot. So in that time frame, in that span of being in the military and law enforcement, working as an EMT and so forth, I got to see and do a lot of different things, meet a lot of different people, be around a lot of different people and circumstances and situations. A lot of times it was off duty where I would come across accidents or wind up directing traffic, when I'm done with my shift as a police officer or whatever on my way home. Sometimes things just come upon you, and you have to deal with them. You can ignore them to a certain extent. I suppose you could pretend like it's not happening, and you could say, that's not my problem, I'm off duty, I'm, that's sucks to be them kind of thing. I'll call 911 for you, or, somebody else, I'll call the police and see if they want to come and direct traffic or whatever. But when you're already there, when you're on the scene, when you come across an accident, when you come across a situation, it's like right in your face, blocking traffic or whatever it is, you have a choice. You can either assist, and that's why people would always say never put the EMS sticker on your on your car, you know, because in certain states, you know, you put on your the back glass of your vehicle or on your bumper or whatever, you know, and if you come across a scene and you're the first one there, that happens a lot, you know, because the ambulance or fire department hasn't shown up yet, or police officer or what have you, you know, and it does happen. And if someone sees that you have that sticker on your car and you don't stop, they can turn you in. That used to be the law in certain states. Not a very good law, but, you know, it was a law in certain states. So it was one of those things they always warned the hospital corpsmen about in the Navy that had their EMT license, which I was one of them, and there were several others, you know, getting nationally registered as an EMT. They give you the opportunity or whatnot, you know. So I just always remembered that. But the main thing that would make you stop and help is compassion and civility, you know, doing the right thing, having a respect for life, thinking about what if it was your family, your wife, your daughter, your son, your husband, your relative, whatever, your friend. Wouldn't you want somebody to stop and help? Wouldn't you want someone to assist before the fire department or the police department or ambulance got there? So, because I've had these opportunities, I've learned a lot. I've watched a lot. I've observed a lot in my life, and I can go back on experiences that I have had personally or that I know other people have had that I either witnessed or they told me about. And the fact that I was not there, obviously, in Minneapolis, and all we have to go on is video footage of this situation, this horrific situation, makes it very difficult to assess what really happened. It's kind of a he said, she said thing. Things can be doctored, things can be changed. And it's like Call for an Uprising said, you know, in his video, you know, a lot of this is a psyop. It's a psychological operation. It's, you know, it's like I've said many times before in messages, and, you know, it's to elicit an emotional response, you know, and that's exactly what it does. And it's very, very effective. It makes people angry because they see an unlawful shooting. They see in their minds, you know, they see a situation that could have been handled differently, where lethal force didn't necessarily have to be used, you know. According to the video footage and what was seen, it looks really bad from what I've been able to see and what has been shown and what's been talked about. But there are two sides to every story, as we know, okay? And who really knows what the truth is? Somewhere in between lies the truth, you know? But how do we really know? So all I can do is assess what I saw from the video footage that, you know, has been released or what have you. And I could tell you what I would have done in the situation with my previous law enforcement experience and what other people that I know of would have done and did do because I witnessed it. And because I had the opportunity when I was in 2003, you know, to go to the police academy, use my GI Bill, and I went to the police academy after serving several years, you know, as a hospital corpsman, active duty in the Navy, and as an EMT on the civilian side and so forth. You know, I decided to, and a little bit as a security supervisor, coordinator, I kind of got thrown into that in a way. I mean, it was just one of those situations where I was a trustworthy individual. They knew me. They gave me the job kind of thing. I didn't have a whole lot of experience at the time. But I decided to go to the police academy in 2003. I graduated the police academy, became a police officer and so forth. And from the time of 2003 to basically 2017, I, you know, spent the majority of my life either working in law enforcement on the civilian side, federal side, military side in the Navy Reserve, and federal side is in Bureau of Prisons as a correction officer, and security, doing just about every type of security people could think of: event security, mall security, hospital security, personal protection. You know, met a lot of famous people. I had a lot of opportunities, and I maybe not a lot of famous people, a few famous people, but anyway, and so I took advantage of them when they were available to me. Working certain events, like I said, personal protection, just about any kind of security you could think of, armed and unarmed, and just, working closely with the Denver Police Gang Unit when I was in Colorado and so forth, because I worked in an area outside of Mile High Stadium, a gangland area outside of Mile High Stadium, doing, patrol there and so forth. So I had a lot of experiences. I witnessed a lot of things. I witnessed the right things and the wrong things. I witnessed cops do horrible things and security officers do horrible things. I've been thrown in the fray. I've been thrown in the middle at times. It was tough. Sometimes it was hard. I witnessed stuff that I wish I wouldn't have witnessed. I saw things I wish I wouldn't have seen. So when I see stuff like this, I kind of withhold judgment, for lack of a better term, as much as I can, because I wasn't there. And I do know that people have to make split-second decisions at times when it comes to shoot, don't shoot, life and death situations. But I'll tell you what I know. Because, like I said, because of the things I've been involved with, the people I knew, the people I worked with, the people that were my supervisors or what have you, commanding officers, I've been in some, let's just say I have had the opportunity to see some things that changes my perspective. In my 30s and 40s, I had a different perspective than I do as a 55-year-old man now. I had more of a law enforcement perspective, more of a, what do they call it? There's a spirit of the law and the letter of the law. I was more of a letter of the law guy, and I regret that, because there was many times I should have used more of the spirit of the law. And, so when I had the opportunity, now I'm trying to be more spirit of the law, use compassion and civility, put myself in someone else's shoes if possible. Think about it, what if it was my family or friends or people I cared about or whatever. Just try to exercise that kind of compassion and civility that Jesus would, and would want us to show. And I try to think about those things. But in law enforcement, it's difficult. There are many times where law enforcement officers can use discretion, and there are other times where they cannot. They are bound by the law in certain situations. The problem I have with this whole thing is I believe it could have been handled differently. I also believe, and I have been on record saying this, I've called them ICE thugs. And the reason I say that is because I knew the director of the ICE Academy back in 2007. And the reason I knew him, the director of the ICE Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, is because he was my commanding officer at Naval Air Station Jacksonville for the Naval Reserve Security Force. So, that I was a member of from 2005 to 2008. So, we knew each other. So when I had to go to Glencoe, Georgia for my training for the Bureau of Prisons, I sat in his office and we talked for a few minutes because, like I said, he was the director of ICE at that time. At that time, ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement, I think was probably a more legitimate law enforcement agency than it is now. Because at that time, people had to be trained properly. just like U.S. Marshals, Air Marshals. They had it all in Glencoe, Georgia. It's the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. So it trained the Custom Border Protection, it trained ICE, it trained U.S. Marshals, Air Marshals, and it trained the Bureau of Prisons, correctional officers. So at that time, going to the academy there for the Bureau of Prisons, I had the opportunity to meet with my commanding officer, and he couldn't understand why I wasn't in ICE. Well, one is I needed to find something pretty quick, and the process for getting to the BOP was much simpler, much easier, much faster than getting to ICE. Another thing was I didn't have all the qualifications to be in ICE at the time, and now it doesn't appear there's any qualifications. Now, this is my perspective, okay? What I see out there and what I've heard about and what I've witnessed and what people have reported on is it does not appear that the ICE now, in comparison to the ICE that was being trained, say back in 2007, 2008 time frame or whatever that I was familiar with, and the Custom Border Protection and so forth, is different, completely different. It appears that these guys now, I mean, the covering of the face, for one thing, I don't understand that. I'll never understand that. I mean, it's like, why are you covering your face up? I don't get it. They say, well, it's for our own personal protection or whatever. Well, there are police officers, there are law enforcement officers in various branches that don't cover their faces. I don't get that, okay? I also don't get how you don't need warrants to do certain things. I don't get how there's kind of like a free-for-all. It does seem like thuggery to me, because it doesn't seem like these guys are trained. It doesn't seem like they know anything about arrest control. It doesn't seem like they know anything about any type of tactics, self-defense tactics, have any kind of self-defense skills. It's like just beat people down kind of thing. I mean, there are ways to detain people, to arrest people without causing serious bodily injury and death. They teach you all of that at academies, at least they used to, where you can use the minimal amount of force necessary, and they would preach that to you. Use the minimal amount of force necessary to detain a subject without breaking bones, dislocating bones, causing death or serious bodily injury. Now, there are ways when people are completely uncooperative to use pressure points and pain control techniques and whatnot, to render someone, how do I say it, to just basically get them to comply, pain compliance, okay? There are ways to do that. Chokeholds are usually a no-no, okay? Because you can do serious damage to the trachea, to the windpipe. You can wind up killing people. And, if you don't know how to apply proper chokeholds, like a rear naked choke or what have you, to knock someone out so you can put the handcuffs on, you can wind up doing serious damage. And sometimes if they have a heart problem or whatever else, you can wind up killing them. Not knowing at the time that that's what's happening, but, lack of blood to the brain for a certain period of time, if they already have some type of medical ailment or whatever, it's possible they could die, especially if they're taking other medications or whatever that might complicate that. So you have to be very, very careful. Yes, you're looking out for yourself, your partner. You're looking out for the other people that are wearing the uniform as well. But at the same time, you are responsible for the suspect, the subject. They are your responsibility. Now, what Noam said, and I understand people are calling for her resignation, and I have no problem with that. All right. What Noam said was that the woman was trying to weaponize her vehicle and use it as a weapon. Okay, fair enough. Full disclosure, I've seen people do that. Okay? That still are still alive. Okay? When I was in I was assigned at Naval Air Station Jacksonville. Like I mentioned, it was 2007. I think it was the summer before I met up with my commanding officer, who is also the director of ICE. I mean, he lived in Brunswick, Georgia at the time, I believe, and Glencoe, Georgia is not far from there, where he would, he was the director, and then he would travel to Jacksonville, for our, 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year thing, We had to do the air show. Every year they would have an air show where they would open I don't think they do it anymore. I doubt it, but maybe, I don't know. They opened the base up to civilians. And it was always a terrible thing. We hated it. I hated it. As a matter of fact, I wound up transferring from Jacksonville to Orlando because I lived closer to Orlando then anyway, and I got tired of the drive. But one of the main reasons I did is because I said, I am never doing another air show for my 2 weeks ever again. It was miserable. The setup, the tear down, dealing with all the civilians, drunks, because people had no respect. They would come on the base and they would not recognize that they are on a military installation, that they could literally get shot legally for climbing on military equipment, jumping fences, going into unauthorized areas. And they didn't care. Civilians did not care. And when you're dealing with law enforcement, and everybody was either full-time police officers or we were master at arms, like military police in the Navy, trained, gone through a lot of training, either civilian law enforcement, federal, or, we did a lot of training, felony stops and stuff like that, military training on base and so forth, at the range in Kings Bay in Georgia, the submarine base down there and so forth, a lot of training. And so we were highly trained in what we were doing. But we had to do a lot of things. We had to conduct traffic control. We had to stand posts. We had to do gate duty. We had to try to keep people from crossing fences, going to unauthorized areas, climbing on military equipment. A lot of things. Lots of patrol. Lots. Now, the air show was only for the weekend, but the setup and the teardown took forever. So our 2 weeks was basically preparing for the air show, and how many, I don't know, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, I don't know, Jacksonville, Florida, probably hundreds of thousands, of civilians that would come onto the base. Now, some people would behave themselves and other people act like idiots. Well, this one particular person decided they were going to act like an idiot, and we had things set up in the roads. You can only turn this way, not that way. You cannot, go this direction, only that direction, and we're directing traffic and we are dealing with tons of people here, right? So we need people to follow directions. We need them to listen. We need them to obey. So long story short with this, I knew of a guy in our unit who was a police officer, St. Johns County, I think, deputy sheriff. And this is how I think this situation could have been handled in Minneapolis, okay? This is my opinion. Shooting out the tires may or may not work. Probably not, okay? I've heard people say that. But this is what he did. Was he authorized to pull his weapon and shoot this person and possibly kill them if they did not obey his orders? No. Only if they tried to hit them with their vehicle. Did they try to do that? Debatable. But because the law enforcement officer on the base I'm talking about here, back in 2007, I think it was, summer of 2007, he was able to articulate that this person did not follow his directions, and and that he felt that he was in fear of his life, that they could have hit him with their car. He simply drew his ASP, which is a metal collapsible baton. You might see police officers have them on their utility belts, their duty belts, or what have you, or sheriff's deputies, if you're not familiar with them. He drew his ass because we were fully armed, fully equipped for the entire time, even wearing the Kevlar, I believe, and if I recall correctly. And maybe not, I don't remember exactly. But anyway, he extended it and he smashed the guy's windshield out. And that stopped the car. That stopped the person from driving. That stopped them from turning in direction that he was not supposed to turn in. He was unauthorized to turn in that direction. We had everything set up. We had the cone set up. We had signage. We had everything. And we had a lot of military police personnel, to control anything that might occur. And this guy decided, I'm going to do what I want to do. And from what I understand, even aimed his vehicle toward the law enforcement officer. It was also, military. He was a petty officer first class in E6. So he served a long time in law enforcement and a long time in the military. You got to be in for quite a while, usually a good 8 to 10 years, if not longer, to be an E6, because it's very difficult to make chief in the Navy. But anyway, so my point being here is the person that I knew that did this in my unit, they did not get in trouble at all. Now, the driver wanted to sue them, sue the military, sue everybody, wanted them busted down, nothing. Didn't even get a reprimand. Why? Because he was able to articulate that he was in fear of his life and that this person did not follow the directions. As a matter of fact, I think that particular civilian wasn't allowed back onto the base. So, they're serious, is my point. They're serious. Now, from what I saw, from what I could tell, from what the video footage that was released of this whole thing, it appeared to me that would have been very difficult for the law enforcement officer to do that, but possible. So he chose to draw his weapon and fire into the vehicle because it appeared to me the person was trying to leave. But if he can articulate that, and apparently he did, and apparently that's the narrative, much to the chagrin of the Minneapolis mayor who, went off on his, using F-bombs and this is BS for the narrative and everything else. And people are very angry and very upset. And I understand that. But it appears that the law enforcement officer, the ICE officer, agent, what have you, was able to articulate that, and there were witnesses to back up to corroborate his story. So that's why he was able, so he drew his weapon and he chose to fire into the vehicle, evidently killing, the driver. And then now we have the situation we have. And all I can say is it's sad, and I think it was unnecessary because I think it could have and should have been handled differently. I think, from what I could tell, if you're going to try to stand to the side or stand in front and shoot into the vehicle, because the narrative is he wasn't behind, because if you're behind, that's like shooting somebody in the back, which you cannot do unless they're an escaped felon under very, very extenuating circumstances. Okay, you don't shoot people in the back. You don't shoot people from behind if it can be helped at all. It has to be very extenuating circumstances, and you have to be able to articulate why. So from what I understand is the shots didn't come from the rear, because if it came from the rear, there's no excuse for that. You can't excuse that at all, because especially if they're fleeing the area. People say, well, no, we're trying to stop them or whatever else. I get that, because if they tried to hit you with the vehicle and then you're trying to stop them, okay. But then if you shoot them from behind, though, that's a serious issue. That's when, people say, oh, let's shoot out the tires or whatever the case may be. Okay, I get all that. All right. But you really got a lot of explaining to do when you shoot somebody from behind. So, from what I understand, the shots came maybe from the front. Well, if the shots came from the front, then they probably could have smashed the vehicle windows out, the windshield out, like they've done many, many times before. If you've watched their arrest, they take their asp and they smash out the car windows to drag people out of their cars. Done it many times before. If you look at videos of, ICE making arrests and detaining people, for deportation or what have you. So it's very, very hard to tell. If the shots came from behind, that's not good. I mean, that's a bad situation. Some people say, well, but you had to stop him somehow. So shooting from behind, would have, is the only way to stop them. Sometimes you just you let them go. Okay? No harm, no foul. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got injured at that time. Close calls. There are always close calls in law enforcement and public service, EMTs, paramedics, firefighters. There's always close calls. It doesn't necessarily give someone the right to shoot from behind. Now, from the side or the front, like I said, I know it's fast. You got to make a split-second decision. Cops always do, and they have to be able to explain why they did what they did, and could they have done something different? Did they have to use lethal force? Was it necessary? People will say, yeah, because she weaponized her vehicle. That's their narrative that they're sticking to. She tried to use her vehicle to run him over or whatever. And we've seen that many times at marketplaces, usually in other countries or whatever, where people have tried to run people over and have successfully done that. So in those situations, I get it. But still, shooting from behind in that situation, you got a lot of explaining to do. Even from the side. I mean, because you're technically out of the way, you didn't get hit, and shooting at that point is well, if you can stop the vehicle, fine. But then if you wind up, if this is what happened, shooting and killing the person, the driver, then we have the situation we have now. And I said, and smashing out the windshield, yeah, you'd have to be quick. But smashing out the windshield was probably the best option. That would stop the driver. That's what I saw happen. That back in 2007, and it was like everybody was kind of like, whoa. But we understood that he was authorized. And there was no repercussions. There was no reprimand. There was nothing. Yeah, the civilian, he was furious. How could you do this to my car? You didn't listen. You're on a military installation. It is our job to protect lives and property. And you are a guest here. And you did not do what we asked you to do. It's that simple. That's how ICE and law enforcement and federal agents look at this too. So there's not going to be any compassion or civility. It's out the window. It's gone. It's shoot first, ask questions later. It's, elicit the emotional response, using whatever operation is available to cause as much chaos as possible, order out of chaos, to get people to hate each other, to get people to rise up for an internal revolution. That's the goal. Get people to hate each other, get people to rise up, get them to fight against the government, get them to fight against law enforcement, get them to fight. Because there's not going to be any peaceful protests for the most part. It's going to be crazy, probably from here on out. And I will say this in closing, okay, to end this thing. My friend Will, and I might do a Substack live stream on some things tomorrow too. I'm not sure yet. But my friend Will, he mentioned to me, and I mentioned it in the last Substack I did, that he got the friend, or he got the date, the 11th in his spirit. That's this Sunday. And like I've said before, when he's gotten dates in his spirit before during prayer or whatever, I paid attention, listen, because he's been very spot on. It may have been a personal thing with him and the ministry he's involved with in Kensington or whatever, but sometimes it's not. And he's spot on. And some horrible, horrible things have happened. Very traumatic things have happened, when he's told me to watch for some other dates in the past, and I have, and it's just like, whoa, dude, you nailed it. Well, the Lord told him basically, but he nailed it. He said, I'm watching the 11th. And at first I was like, okay. And I was like, well, the 11th. Okay, what's the 11th? That's this Sunday. Well, this Sunday is also the Golden Globes. People are like, so what? Who cares, right? Well, here's why you should care. Because last year, after the Golden Globes, is when California began to burn. Within 3 days, Hollywood was up in flames. Even the sign itself, if you recall. They had the Golden Globes on the 5th, and then by the 8th, Hollywood, whatever, the Palisades, all that area was in flames. Why? Because the host, who's going to be the host this year, Nikki Glaser, decided to disrespect God, talking about how many mentions people were getting, I guess, for people getting their little golden idols up there. Mom's got 2 mentions. God, the creator of the universe, 0 mentions. No big surprise in this godless town, or something like that, for some laughs. Making fun of God, mocking our Savior, mocking the Lord, mocking Jesus. And like how Pastor Ben said in his message, Pastor Ben Faircloth, in his New Year's message, the prophetic word that he gave was, you cannot blaspheme the name of Jesus, and then flaunt his name as well. So you can't just, say, we love God, we love Jesus, God bless America, Jesus, 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 and then blaspheme his name too. You can't speak blessing and curses out of the same mouth. And then, tell other nations to follow us, because we're so Christian and righteous and holier than thou, right? God doesn't like that. Like Pastor Ben said, the Lord doesn't appreciate that. So you cannot blaspheme his name on one side of your mouth and then praise it on the other side, as a nation, as a people. All right. So this whore of Babylon, basically Nikki Glaser, stands up there and, mocks God. And then within 3 days, Hollywood is up in flames. Well, the 11th, this Sunday, is the Golden Globes again. I wonder, and it's the same woman that's going to be hosting these things. I wonder if she does something stupid like that again. She opens up her fat mouth, instead of shutting her pie hole, and she says something stupid, disrespecting God, disrespecting Jesus, disrespecting, and she is creator of the universe, no mentions, no surprise in this godless town, ha, ha, ha. It's funny, ha, ha, ha. Everybody laughs, right? It's not funny. And California paid for it. Will they pay again? Will somebody else pay? I mean, what's going to happen if she says something stupid again? Maybe nothing, maybe something very severe. All I know is, Will said, watch the 11th. I'm watching. That's this Sunday. Something major going to go down? I don't know. Could be something personal with him. I have no idea. But sometimes, in the past, when he's told me to watch, I've watched, and some serious stuff has gone down. So I'm just like, all right, dude, I'm paying attention. I'm watching. So I just want to throw that out there to people, so you can be aware. Don't be surprised if these sodomites and, Babylonians, at the Golden Globes or whatever, get up there and mock Jesus, mock God, thank Satan for their golden idol or whatever else, and then California burns or floods or something, or a major earthquake or something happens because the Lord's like, I'm not putting up with this. Sorry. Well, not sorry, but you know what I mean. It's just like, I'm not putting up with this. You're going to pay. You're going to pay. And we will definitely pay, because we are poking every single nation in the eye now at this point and trying to, throw our weight around, and to the point where Putin wants to, sink our ships. It's crazy. It's getting crazy. I can see a lot of things coming to pass now. I can see a lot of things, converging, coming together now, finally. in 2026. Basically starting at the end of 2025, but going into 2026, I can see a lot of things converging. So it's just a matter of time. All right, that's all I have. Y'all have a great weekend. I almost said weekend. It's only Thursday. Darn. Anyway, y'all have a great evening. And yeah, this is just my thoughts on it from my own personal perspective and experiences, things I've seen and witnessed in my life or whatever. It's a horrible situation. I hate it. I hate when these things happen. The shooting at the church in Utah, even though it's an LDS church or whatever, at a funeral, sounds like a mob hit. 2 people killed, I think, and 8 wounded or whatever, 3 in critical condition. I don't remember all the stats, but just horrific. More and more shootings all over the place, everywhere. So be prepared. Have your head on a swivel. Bleed the blood. And stay out of the protests. Stay out of the cities if you can help it. Stay away from all this stuff if you can help it. If you can't, man, just be careful. Be smart. Be wise. All right, that's it. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.